Welcome, everyone. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me. If everybody can hear me, just put a little yes in your box so we could start sharing. Yes, JNet is live and we're good. It's a pleasure to be here today in this very, very, very auspicious time and of the Omer between Pesach and Shavuot. Something very, very special is happening. We are given the possibility from above to connect to our true self and to discover ourselves. And this all happened on the night of Pesach. On Pesach it says, Moshcheni acharecha narutza eviamni amelech hadarav nagila venis mechabach. King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, teaches us in Shir HaShirim, in the Song of Songs, Moshcheni acharecha, pull me after you. Narutza, we will run. Eviani amelech hadarav, the king has brought me to his chambers, his private chambers, that is. Nagila venismechabach, let's rejoice and be happy in you. Nagila venismechabo, let's be happy in him. What does that mean? What are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that we were in Egypt. In Egypt, we were in a state where the body was trapped. There's situations where it's just not the time to start having lengthy discussions about getting out of the place where you are, because you're in a question, in a situation of life and death. You're in a situation where, God forbid, at this moment you can completely lose yourself. You can lose your capacity to think because you're so absorbed, self-absorbed. You're so absorbed in your personal slavery. It's not time to discuss, it's not time to work on yourself, it's just time to run. And therefore, Moshcheni acharecha, the word Moshcheni, pull me after you, is not plural, it's singular. The body had to be pulled after the soul. But after you get out of your environment, the most difficult thing of getting out of Egypt is getting Egypt out of you. And that's what happened. Now narutza, we will run together. This running away from evil, is something of the past. It's something that happened at the time we came out of Egypt. It will never happen again. Let me explain. This process of running is a process of no longer running away from the bad, but being transformed, becoming a vessel in order to be able to receive the Torah. And in that process, something extraordinary happens. Every day, another facet of our persona, another facet of ourself is actually being refined, is being dealt with, is being touched, is being transformed. And this happens over a period of 49 days, 7 weeks. 7 weeks, we'll explain very soon why. At the time of Mashiach, it does not say that we will run away, but it says over there, Velo bimnusa telechun. This time you will not be running away from the exile. This time I will go with you and we will be walking together. Walking. What is the difference between running and walking? Running is a situation where a person is afraid of evil, and therefore he has to run away from the evil. On the other hand, walking is a situation where I've transformed the evil. And I'm not running away from anything, because I've changed my inherent nature. I've changed the nature of my enemies. You know, it's very interesting. One day, the Alter Rebbe was asked, what is the difference? The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Chassidism, was asked, what is the difference between Chassidic philosophy and Musar? I myself studied a lot of Musar since I did not go to Chabad all my life, and I was able to experience it myself. So he said like this, Musar is, it seems that we're hearing an echo, so I'm going to have to put earphones. Musar is basically a situation. Imagine, he says, a thief comes to the house, and he robs the house once. And then you put certain locks on the doors, and he's able to come through the windows. So you put locks on the windows. And then you have this whole fortress you build around the house. That's the concept of Musar. I escape the bad by just getting it away, blocking it away so it cannot get in. What is Chassidut? Chassidut is another way altogether. The thief comes in, you sit him down, and you talk to him. Why are you stealing? You need money. Well, let me find you a job. You don't need to steal. You could do this in an honest way. And you explain to the thief that there's a better way to do what he's doing, and in a much more efficient, healthy way. So it's not about running away from the bad. It's about integrating, accepting who we are, integrating the good in such language, with such semantics, that the brain, the animal soul, understand that what's good for it is actually to do the right thing. Just like you're doing all tonight, we're doing tonight. Tonight, we could have been somewhere, maybe doing something else, and we decided to come together and share these few thoughts in order to transform ourselves. In the process of transformation, there is a concept in Kabbalah which is a concept of Maati velo Maati. Maati velo Maati is the concept of being present, being absent. 0, 1, 0, 1. I'm sure you've heard this, especially in the computer age. It is a common thing. The concept of appearing and disappearing. This is one concept we're going to be approaching tonight. And another concept we're going to be approaching is the concept of Kabbalistic concept of betisha. Betisha means literally a type of beating, of forcing one in. Let me explain. I remember one day, one of my friends visited me from Israel. My best friend visited me. And he saw everything I was doing. He was very proud of me. He encouraged me. But at a certain point, he saw beyond what I see. You see, when a person is completely self-absorbed, he's absorbed not only in himself, he's absorbed in all the things that he has to do. Often, he forgets what he needs to do and what he can do, what he can truly accomplish. Well, as somebody that didn't see me for 10 years, when he saw what I could accomplish more, suddenly it just got him upset. It got him frustrated. He said, Shai, what are you doing with your life? Imagine being a rabbi of a community. Usually people tap you on the back. They tell you, wow, this is very nice, great advancement. Rabbi, this good, this was very good. Keep it up. And suddenly, here I have my best friend coming, and he sees another picture altogether. He knows who I am. He knows what I can do. And he sees the potential that's around me. And he realizes, you're not maximizing your potential at all. So he did something which was cruel. He started giving me a lecture. But a lecture, I'm talking about a lecture where he completely destroyed me. For a second, actually more than a second, for that night I was in total, utter shock. If he wasn't my best friend, most probably I would never talk to him again. But because I know he really has my interest at heart, I understood where he's coming from. And then suddenly, as he did this, I reminded myself of this concept of betisha, this concept of Maati velo Maati. What is that? In Kabbalah and Chassidut, we explain that there's a vessel and there's a light. You see, our brain, for example, is a vessel to our consciousness. Our consciousness can only impress upon our brain what our brain is ready to handle. Sometimes it gets too much. We get overwhelmed. We either cry, we either laugh, we either escape. We find different ways just not to accept fully the reality, which would cause irresponsibility. So what happens is that the vessel is sometimes too tight to receive. And therefore, what happens is that it's a shock. Initially, it's a shock. So the light penetrates the vessel. The vessel just is not able to contain it. But suddenly, the fact that this light, this new thing came into the vessel, caused a certain elasticity in the vessel that wasn't there before. It's just like when you start stretching. When you start stretching, right, at the beginning, you stretch, it's a little difficult. It's a little unpleasant because you're doing a movement maybe that's going to be a little not what you're used to. But at the end, once you do that exercise, you feel uncomfortable. But suddenly there's a new movement that just happened now in the muscle that never happened before. And in the tendon. And once you do it once, and you do it a little more, and just a little more, and just a little more, at a certain moment, it becomes easier. This is the concept of Maati velo Maati. Just like electricity that would come into a bulb or into something that would just not be able to handle it, so the system of the switches, right, the fuse would just stop right away. For 1 second it would work, and boom, it would right away stop the process. This is the concept of Maati velo Maati. I'm present, but I'm absent. I disappear right away. I give you inspiration, and I disappear. I give you inspiration, I disappear. And in the process, you create a certain elasticity of the vessel that wasn't there before. We all want to grow out of ourselves. We all want to reach our true heights. But in order to do that, sometimes it's not so comfortable. So this is exactly what was happening to me, as he told me all these things, but he just hammered them into me. You know, he said, "What are you doing? Look what you could be doing." And it was just too much. And that concept is what is the betisha. Betisha means that you have a vessel, you have the light that penetrates the vessel, but there's a friction. Because suddenly the light is more powerful, is a little bigger than what the best vessel can handle. Over there, there's a little stretching, and you're not at ease with yourself anymore. That's what happened to me. One day, this is one of my favorite stories, Rabbi Eidenstein Zaltz. Imagine, one of the first rabbis to have translated and elucidated, I forgot the word, one of the first rabbis to have elucidated the Talmud and the whole, a tremendous work. A person could be proud for this life and many, many other lives for accomplishing this in a lifetime. Rabbi Eidenstein came to see the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And when he came to see the Rebbe, he said, "Rebbe, I'm working on 7 projects. One of them is the Talmud." And he wanted to see exactly where he could cut. And the Rebbe told him something very interesting. The Rebbe said, "I think you should be adding a few more projects, maybe 2 or 3. Rabbi Steinsaltz, as a chassid, as a soldier of his Rebbe, did not utter a word. Instead, he took what the Rebbe told him. He took this new light that was given to him, and instead of taking it as something negative, as, why am I being told this? Am I not good enough? He thought it over, chewed it, lived with it, slept with it, woke up with it, till he came with this brilliant explanation. And he says the following. He said, "Indeed, imagine you have a vessel, and you put pressure on the vessel. You put a lot of pressure on the vessel, and you put 5 times the pressure, 10 times the pressure. The vessel might be able to still receive the pressure. What happens if you put 100 times the pressure? It's going to crush itself. What happens if you put 1,000 times the pressure? The heat, the pressure will make the vessel melt and go back to its original state. And you will be able to reshape it into another vessel." You see, what the Rebbe was telling him, he said, was that indeed a liter bottle can only contain a liter if you shape it into a liter bottle. But if you bring it back to its original state, you can reshape it into a 2-liter bottle. It might be with thinner walls, but you'll still have a double the size of a container. The same thing. It's not a question of what I've accomplished, where I am, and being proud of ourselves. It's a question of where am I going? Am I going to receive that light and permit, through bitul, through self-nullification, to erasing myself, through selflessness, will I be able to let the light come in and become myself a much, much greater vessel? This is what happens during this period of time. As we exited Egypt, as we just concluded Pesach, this is a time where every day the vessel gets extended. But instead of being extended only in one facet, every one of the 7 emotions is dealt with individually in its 7 facets. Like this, suddenly you have a chart of yourself, an image, an imago of yourself facing right in front of you, and you have no choice but every day to deal with another aspect of yourself. And this process is called Sefirat HaOmer. Sefirat HaOmer in Hebrew means literally to count the days of the Omer till we would offer the Omer Korban, the Omer offering, which was a bread offering and made of barley, a barley offering. And what happens is that in this process, we would get out of our animalistic self, and every day we would count. But the process of counting, the words in Hebrew have a lot of meaning. The word lispor in Hebrew comes from the word sapphire. Lispor, sapphire, right? Sapir, even sapir, shining. Meaning that every day as we count, we polish. Every minute counts. Every day counts. What did I accomplish to do? What did I accomplish today? Where did I go? Where did I reach? And slowly but surely you deal with another aspect of your persona. And as you refine yourself, you become a greater vessel for holiness. Of course, it's very difficult to change. By the way, if you have any questions at this moment or any moment throughout this conference, what's beautiful with JNet is that this is all interactive. This is a platform which permits us to live this class and this journey together, and not just me being a lecturer, but actually you interacting together. So please, if you have any questions, you may just put it in your chat box, and I will address these issues, please God, tonight. So far, we've discussed the fact that we are becoming a vessel. We need to work on ourselves. We need to stretch our brains, stretch our emotions, and become more refined human beings. And when we do this, when we become more refined, at this moment, we start touching the infinite. You know, it's interesting because the days of Sfirat HaOmer are divided in 2 periods. The Kabbalists explain that the 49 days of Sfirat HaOmer spell out, since every letter of the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value, they spell out the word Lev, which is 32, Tov, good, good heart. Lev is a heart, Tov is good. Good, Tov in Hebrew is 17. So 32 plus 17 is 49. Lev Tov. And if you look in the Mishnah that we just read in Pirkei Avot this past week, we talked about the different qualities which are the most important. What is the most important path the most important quality a person should be looking for? So a person said a good friend, maybe a good neighbor, a good eye. And finally, one of the students said a good heart. Because if your heart is in the right place, then everything is in the right place. The heart is very, very interesting. In Chassidut, it's interesting because the heart is multifaceted. It's a double facet. Let me explain. In Chassidut, we know from the Tanya that man's head is above the heart, that we know naturally. I mean, for most of us, right? So when the head is above the heart, it means, literally speaking, that the head is higher than the heart. But there is a concept in Hasidic philosophy that the heart is higher than the head. Do you know how? Let me explain. There is what we call in Hebrew and in Hasidic and Kabbalistic language, Reuta de Liba. Reuta de Liba refers to the will of the heart, the depth of the heart. The heart has two facets, the superficial part of the heart and the inner part of the heart. It's true, the head is higher than the superficial part of the heart, but the inner part of the heart goes and reaches the crown, something which is beyond understanding. And look how interesting it is. Today, there's many schools, believe it or not, around the world which teach microfacial expressions. Microfacial expressions in the Mossad in Israel. If you always ask yourself a question why people are not being questioned in a room, or why are they just going through a small few minutes with a soldier of the army which asks him a few questions when he's at the passport control in Israel, is because every one of them has been trained in micro expressions. What does that mean? It means that, for example, if somebody lifts his lip like I'm doing now, right, that shows contempt. If a person is going to blink his eye in a certain way, if a person is going to close his eyes, all these micro expressions express the truth of a person. Now, what's very, very interesting is that they teach in these schools, especially politicians, which are the greatest, most honest people we have on earth. I'm being facetious, obviously. And what happens is that they are taught especially to control their micro expressions. What is a micro expression? A micro expression expresses what's in your heart, in your deep heart. And they made a study, and you could actually see the face of politicians when they speak. They have this little micro expression, and right away, in this millisecond that they actually realize they did this expression, the mind takes over, and then they change the facial expression in order to have a poker face, in order not to show their true emotions. But the face in Hebrew is not a singular word. In Hebrew, the word face does not exist. The word panim in Hebrew is actually faces, because your different facial expressions are different facets of your heart. They're the expressions of what your heart really thinks. So, as you go to the depth of the heart, Lev Tov, when your heart is good inside, it reflects on your face. And that's something which is higher than your understanding. And you can transform that just by changing your heart. Have a change of heart, work on yourself, control the heart. How do you control the heart? Chassidut teaches us that in order to control the heart, you need to be able to fill the mind with a new level of understanding. So before we talk about the understanding of God, let me quote our dear Rebbe. The Rebbe says a sentence which, if you didn't know it was the Rebbe, you would most probably think it's some life coach that said it, lehavdil. The Rebbe said it is imperative that everyone know his qualities, his potential in the most minute detail. Okay, makes sense, right? But then the Rebbe continues and says what nobody else said. The reasoning behind this is because if a person knows his potential and he knows it clearly, with great focus, great detail, he knows his true qualities, then he knows how much he should be able to demand from himself. You see, unfortunately, in this generation where low self-esteem, unfortunately, is a very, very common thing, people like to say something a teenager would say. What are these expressions already? Like, whatever. I don't care. I can't do this. It's not for me. That's enough, right? We just can't hear it. Well, that's basically an escape of being and demanding from who I need to be. When I know my qualities, I know how much to demand for myself. The beginning of everything is know yourself. Know who you are, what you deserve to be. Have that image before you. Then you can grow out. Then you can get out of your vessel. It might be painful, but the vessel will extend. Think bigger, do bigger. The light will be vacuumed into this vessel. And it's incredible how slowly but surely, as you create a greater and greater vessel, you will see yourself thrive. But if you're busy worrying and saying, I'm nothing, well, you know, it reminds me, by the way, this story. I remember in my community that when I just moved in, I gave lectures on Shalom Bayit. You know what the secret of Shalom Bayit is. If you want Shalom, you have to buy it, right? Just joking. Anyways, you can actually laugh in the chat room if you want to, entering like, ha ha ha, corny rabbi, or whatever it is. Guys, chill out. Anyways, let's go back to what we're saying. So he told me once, in my house, I told my wife, I'm the king and you're nothing. And my wife answered me, you're the king of nothing. Basically, who are you the king of? Hashem is the king of who? What are you? If you look at yourself in the highest regards, you'll demand from yourself. A great Chassid, follower of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad Chassidism, once said that the way he conquers his evil inclination, the way he gets out of himself, is by saying to his evil inclination, when a temptation comes or his animal instinct just wants to take over, he says, hey, one second. Me? A chassid, a devout chassid, follower, student of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, I will stoop so low. You have to know who you are. If you know who you are, and you identify yourself to this, you will see yourself grow in an incredible way. But the question is, should we fake it? There's a tremendous Hasidic discourse that I really advise everybody to see. I have a video about it, that's why I said to see, but to learn, to study. This mimer, this Hasidic discourse, is called Lo Yikanef Od Morecha. Over there, in the year Tafshin Chaf Aleph, which corresponds to the year 1962, if I'm not mistaken, the Rebbe discusses the concepts, the fact that it's true, the vessel that we have, thought, speech, action, our physical body is indeed lower than our soul. Our soul is godly, it's lofty, it's connected to infinity. So obviously, if the soul is higher than the body, what can the body do to transform itself? It's the soul that transforms the body. It's not the body that elevates the soul. And the Rebbe concludes the following, with the following story that happened once to a Chassid, somebody that came to the Alter Rebbe, and said to the Alter Rebbe, your Chassidim, your followers are fakers. They're fakers. They don't really mean it when they pray for hours. They don't mean it when they meditate and contemplate on the greatness of God. What do they know from God? And the Alter Rebbe looked at him and thanked him and said, thank you very much. Obviously, in utter shock, what do you mean, thank you? He said, because there's a Mishnah, there's a teaching of our sages that says that if a person limps, he pretends, he fakes limping, before he dies, he will be limping. And if a person fakes that he is poor and he takes from the charity when he doesn't need to take from charity, then he won't die before he's poor. Well, if my Chassidim are faking that they are Chassidim, they're so pious, most probably they won't die before they actually are pious. You have to fake it before you make it. In order to make it, fake it. You have to be there. Today, it's a known science. These teachings are, if you look all over, coaching, which is based on Chassidus basically everywhere, teaches you that the posture you take, the way you look like, that affects your way of thinking. It affects your way of talking. It affects the confidence that you have in yourself. What the Rebbe explained is that it's true, the vessel might be coarse. The body sometimes can be very, very coarse. And the soul is so refined, we might think that, if I'm going to work on my body and fake being good, fake being somebody that I'm not, it might not lead me anywhere. But the Alter Rebbe already taught us that who is a thief? The person that can steal or the person that steals? Who is wise? Who is a Talmid Chacham? A sage? A person that can study or a person that studies? If you study, you will become a sage. You don't really understand? Study and you'll become a sage. If you do good deeds, it's not that you can do good deeds that makes you good, it's the fact that you do good deeds. The fact that you're kind, that makes you who you need to be. And that's the big mistake today of psychology, when they go through these lengthy processes of trying to change couples and transform them by telling them you should think like this and you should just do it. Go to action. Stop asking yourself too many questions. Unfortunately, our society has taught us to blame our parents for who we are, for what happened to us. And we have every reason to do so. Because in Tanya chapter 2, we know that the levushim, the garments, thought, speech, and action that we have that are a part of our body, this is a result of what our parents gave us. And therefore, if I need to blame anybody for my defects, it's going to be my parents. Well, Torah doesn't think like that. If God gave you a body and gave you certain challenges, it's because you have the power to, just by doing what you need to do to transform and to elevate your soul to levels which are incredible. And that's what the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe explains when he says, V'rov tvot b'koar shor. King Solomon teaches us that if you want to cultivate a field, you want to have a great harvest, you can only do it when you have an ox. A man by himself cannot plow, sow, and harvest. It's impossible. How much can a man do? But an ox has a drive. And that drive can bring man to realizing a tremendous success in what he does in his field. God gave us an ox, and that is our body, an animal instinct. The body comes from the world of tohu. If you look in the dictionary, there's the expression of tohu bohu. Tohu bohu is translated as chaos. What is chaos? The world, the dimension of chaos before the creation of the world, before God's put some order in this world and created man, created the order of the worlds, which is the process of the soul. So the soul comes from the world of order. The body comes from the word of chaos. In chaos, you have a syndrome which you find in many, many places. It's not a PhD, how is it called? It's ADHD, that's what it is, yes. It's a system, it's a problem that the light is very, very powerful, but the vessel can't handle it. So you have what's called in Yiddish and documented in the books in university as Spilkes. Spilkes is, I just can't sit because it's too much for me to handle. The body has that Spilkes syndrome. Spilkes syndrome, wow. Spilkes syndrome basically, I have too much and I just can't handle it. The soul is man, which directs his ox. When man is able to take over the ox, the instinct, the animal instinct of the ox, he's able to drive him and to make him do and have a success which is above and beyond what man can do by himself. The soul can never reach the level that it could without a body. With a body, the soul can reach the highest possible levels because it can transform everything in this world to a much higher purpose. Because suddenly, it's just like, imagine in the classroom. You have a situation where you have this turbulent kid in the classroom, and he's the troublemaker, and he's pushing this one, he's talking to this one, little spitballs, and he's agitating everybody, and half of your class is not listening to you. What do you want to do? Find another job, but nobody will accept you in another job. So what do? No, let's be serious. At this moment, the best thing to do is to befriend the troublemaker. And you start explaining, just like to our thief before, explain to the troublemaker what great qualities he has. Boost him. Become his friend. And suddenly, just by addressing the troublemaker and befriending him, you will have transformed the whole classroom. If you take your body and you take these natural instincts that you have, and you say, this instinct, I'm going to use it for good. You have that true image of who you need to be and who you deserve to be and who you truly are. You'll be able to reach it and just go out of yourself. During this period of Sfirat Omer, every week we have another aspect of ourselves. You can go to Chabad.org. They have the daily Sfirah, the daily thought that is connected to this. And there's many, many different explanations in Chassidut that tell us how to get out. What should we be thinking today? What aspect should we be working on? Your body is your friend. People escape their body. They think, what, now that I became religious, now that I became observant, I'm not who I am before. I'm embarrassed. You can be embarrassed of your actions. But if God puts you in a situation, if you grew up in a certain way, it means you have a power that was given to nobody else than yourself. And you have to use that power. You have to use these qualities. You have to use this intelligence. You have to use this power of the heart, the instinct which is in your heart. Lev Tov. Transform your heart into a good heart. A heart that's always working, that's always refining himself. There was a great chassid by the name of Reb Mendel Futafas. I'm sure you've heard of him. He was for many, many years in exile for spreading Judaism, etc. Put his life in danger, literally, for the Jewish people. One day, many years after going out of Russia, becoming one of the mashpiim, the mashpia, the main spiritual guide of Kfar Chabad in Israel, he would come once a year to visit us in Manchester, England, where I studied. And he would farbrengen with us. He would speak to us. And we were so amazed by this monument of a person, incredible person. So we went to him. I remember me and my best friend and I went up and we said, Reb Mendel, what's a good achlata? What's a good resolution to take for the year that will transform us? And he said simply, with not even thinking, he said, Ma'aseh bepoel. Action. Do it. Stop. Al tebalbel et hamoach, like the Israelis say. Stop twisting the head this way and that way and moaning and complaining. Do it. Do it. It's a process. Every day you do a little more, suddenly you're going to open yourself and transform yourself completely and find yourself in another place. One day a chassid came, I think it was to the Tzemach Tzedek or the Rebbe Maharash, the 4th or 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he had done a terrible, terrible sin. So he asked the Rebbe Maharash, the Tzemach Tzedek, what can I do to repair my sin? The Rebbe answered, for such a sin, you would have to fast 300 days. 300 days, meaning that you fast during the daytime, at night you drink water and bread. You have water and bread. The Chassid became livid. He became so pale. He didn't know where to put himself. And the Rebbe answered back to him, Was meinst du? What do you think? Fasten meint nicht essen. You think that fasting means going on a diet? Changing your eating habits? Fasting means trachten a libo de nafshe jeder Tag 15 Minuten. Taking the time for 15 minutes every day to think, where am I holding? What did I accomplish today? Was there movement or was there accomplishment? What could I have done today? What could I have accomplished today? And how tomorrow can be better than today? The story goes that he did this for 300 days, and every day he would take that 15 minutes to think, not to watch the news and fill his mind with all the wonderful things that are happening on CNN, NBC, ABC, EFG. No. He took the time to think about himself, transforming himself one step at a time, opening the vessels, bringing a little more light inside. And what happened is that after 300 days, he came back to the Rebbe. The Rebbe, with his divine vision and inspiration, looked at him and said, you have to know that not only did you repair your sin, but your soul is at a much higher level than it was before you sinned. Transformation. Get out of yourself. It's a process that takes literally 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes of thinking of where I'm standing. Getting a little more refined. What did I do? What could I have done? How can tomorrow be better? And during this period of Sfirat Omer, we have the possibility to refine ourselves and to tap into this. Use these great orot of Tohu, bekelim de tikkun. Use these great powers of the animal soul, which are chaos, which are very powerful and cannot be contained, and direct them under the dominion of the soul. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to contemplate not only on what great qualities we have, we need to contemplate on the fact that we have such a great God. What is the greatness of Hashem? What does it mean that God revives me every second, brings me back to life, sustains me? Look at your organs. Look at the way your body functions. Look at your brain, your eyes, your breathing, your ears, your mouth, every part of yourself. Look at your spouse, look at your children, look at the world, look at the universe. Study Chassidut and realize that God is greater than all of this. And slowly but surely train your brain to think about who you're serving, what's inside of you, what's that infinite part of God which God gives you every day back when you wake up in the morning. When you realize this, then suddenly you'll see not only I can be great, I have a tremendous potential, but I have an infinite resource. And that can only come through the work of the heart, the service of the heart. You see, this whole period, as we said before, is lev tov. Have a good heart. How do you have a good heart? You serve God by praying, taking the time to contemplate on His greatness. And then suddenly your heart gets so filled up with the love of God that it pours over to the left side. And it's not that you're fighting bad, you're just so overwhelmed by the kindness that God gives you every second, every minute, every day, that you're just in love with Hashem. And therefore, you don't have time to do bad. And that's what the Zohar says, Liba palig lechol shaifin. The heart distributes, irrigates the whole body, every part of you. When your heart is in the right place, then automatically you're driven to do the right thing. So as we're approaching the day of Shavuot, the day of the Kabbalat Torah, receiving the Torah, the day of Matan Torah, the day of giving, where God gives us the Torah, let us make ourselves greater vessels. Let us refine ourselves. If anybody has questions or comments or difficulties that you might be going through that you'd like to address on how to address certain things in order to be able to get out of yourself and reach your true potential, this is a good time to put it on your in your chat box. And I'd love to address it if you have any questions. Meanwhile, while you write your questions, I'm going to sing a little nigun. Hopefully you won't close the JNet connection. But hopefully with this nigun, with this song, which, as the Rebbe explains, washes the vessels in order to be able to receive the words of our dear Rebbe, in order to permeate them, they should permeate our being. I'm going to sing a little nigun, and maybe we can review in our mind what we learned today. Hevyani Melech Hadarav, the third part, which I didn't speak about, is the fact that God pulled us out, we worked on ourselves, we ran together, and then God brought us to His chambers. His chambers is Mount Sinai, to rejoice within Him and within His 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Ayanai la da 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 ya yo ya la la da 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 la 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 da da ya na 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 la da 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 da. Ayanai la da da ya na 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 na. Ayana da 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 da. Ayana la da 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 yo, ayana la da 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 ya, ayana la da 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 ya, ayana la da 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 ya, la da 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 ya na na ya, la ya da 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 na 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 na. Ay la 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 ya na 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 la ya da 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 ya na 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 na. So what we learned today is that sometimes if we're ready to transform ourselves, it's a question of just opening ourselves a little more, pushing yourself just a little more, studying a little more, meditating a little more, doing a little more, faking it a little more, fake the right thing. And then you'll see that suddenly you're given a power to your soul and to your being, which is at another level altogether. Realizing what, not the way we see ourselves, but the way God sees us. Not seeing what we've accomplished, but seeing what we can accomplish. Not seeing only who we are, but how much we have to demand from ourselves. How much God expects from us. How much our community, our children, our spouses, our parents, how much we expect from ourselves. I really thank you for joining us tonight at JNet. If anybody has a few more questions or a few questions, so far we haven't had any. So this is a good time to just conclude with answering some questions. Nope, no questions. Thank God. Even though it's important to have questions, because without questions, there's no thinking process. We have to ask ourselves questions and hopefully seek and look for the answers. And as we're looking for the answers, then eventually God gives us the answers to our questions. Thank you very much. And Kabbalat HaTorah b'simcha u'b'pnimiyut. May we receive the Torah with joy and at the same time in an internalized way. And what great preparation with this week, this coming week afterwards, the week of Lag BaOmer, where we celebrate the great revelation of the Zohar, the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We pray that in his merit, as he said, that in the merit of Chassidut, Kabbalah, we will merit to be able to greet Mashiach. May hopefully we'll be sharing this class live, but this time directly, hearing it from Mashiach himself. Amen. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to JNet.